In rage of hatred, the mafia boss kidnapped an innocent girl.
Still doing a little coup break.
They assumed that they were untouchable, unaware the father of this girl will invent the most brutal death for them to settle his scores.
Bye-bye, Donnie.
Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me.
The movie kicks off with Paul, a car mechanic, busy in his workshop. After a while, he video calls his daughter, Beth, who's studying in the city.
How is everything?
Good.
She looks exhausted, and when Paul asks if everything's okay, she brushes it off, saying she's just tired and hasn't been sleeping well. Paul senses something might be off, but decides to let it go.
What's the matter?
Yeah, what? What do you mean?
Oh, nothing.
The next morning, while grabbing his mail, Paul finds a letter from Beth's school about overdue fees. Concerned, he immediately calls her, but instead of Beth, a stranger answers and mocks him before cutting the call. Now alarmed, Paul tries calling again, but there's no response.
This ain't even my phone.
Growing anxious, he leaves her a voicemail, begging her to call back.
Hey, Beth, it's Dad.
He also contacts her school, only to find out that Beth hasn't been staying in her dorm for a while. Rather than going straight to the police, Paul takes matters into his own hands and heads to the city to figure out what's going on. Once there, Paul breaks into Beth's dorm, noticing it's been vacant for some time. As he searches for clues, he stumbles upon a photo of Beth with another girl, who he assumes is her friend. Hoping to learn more, Paul visits a nearby bar where young people often hang out. He shows the bartender the photo and asks if they know anything, but the conversation leads nowhere.
Sorry, buddy. Haven't seen either of them tonight.
Refusing to give up, Paul decides to wait at the bar. After some time, a young woman named Angela walks in with her date. Paul approaches her, introduces himself as Beth's dad, and asks for information.
I'm Beth's father.
Angela, however, isn't interested in helping. Frustrated and desperate, Paul gets into a scuffle with some guys at the bar. The commotion forces Angela to step in.
Go up, asshole! Hey!
And she agrees to talk, but only if Paul buys her dinner. Over the meal, Angela is reluctant to share details at first, but Paul's persistence pays off.
Know her. He has some ideas, anything where she got.
She reveals that Beth got involved with a guy named Ed in New Orleans and fell in with a dangerous crowd.
We went to New Orleans and she ended up meeting this guy named Eddie.
Determined to rescue his daughter, Paul offers Angela money to take him to Ed's location.
$500, we drive down, just point out where he lives.
The next morning, the two hit the road. Angela questions why Paul didn't go to the police.
If you're so worried about Beth, why wouldn't you just call the cops?
And he explains that authorities usually wait 48 hours before acting on missing person cases, which was too long for him to wait.
Didn't do anything for 48 hours.
After some time, they arrive in New Orleans, where Angela first met Ed. Paul warns her to stay out of Ed's business to keep her safe.
It's gonna be better off for you if people don't realize we're together.
Paul enters a nightclub, while Angela heads to the bathroom, where she indulges in some drugs. Under the influence, Angela loses focus on their mission and tries to get Paul to party with her. Realizing he's wasting time, Paul convinces Angela to leave. Just as they're about to go, Angela spots one of Ed's associates.
Get him?
No, but I've seen them hang out a lot.
Paul approaches the man to ask about Ed's whereabouts, but the guy refuses to cooperate and, along with his friends, attacks Paul. Despite being outnumbered, Paul fights back and manages to grab one of their phones before leaving. Back in the car, Angela is shocked by Paul's combat skills. Ignoring her reaction, Paul tells her to text Ed using the stolen phone.
Can you take me home? I want to go home.
They then head to a motel to wait for a reply. At the motel, Angela grows curious about Paul's background, especially given his impressive fighting abilities. Paul brushes off her questions and tells her to get some rest. Alone with his thoughts, Paul worries about Beth's safety. To clear his mind, he takes a shower, revealing a large eagle tattoo on his back and a gunshot scar. Angela notices a tattoo with his late wife's name and learns that Paul's wife passed away from leukemia. Soon, they receive a message from Ed, who is at a nightclub nearby. Without wasting time, they rush over. Outside the club, Angela points out Ed and gives Paul space to handle things. Inside, Paul confronts Ed, demanding answers about Beth. Ed, however, dismisses him and makes disrespectful remarks about Beth. Furious, Paul warns him to tread carefully. At that moment, a man named Stewart, Ed's uncle, steps in and apologizes on Ed's behalf. It turns out Stewart knows Paul and owes him his life from a past encounter. Learning this, Ed admits he dated Beth, but claims she's now entangled with a drug dealer known as Pharmacy. He then gives Paul Pharmacy's location.
I ran out of ammo.
As Paul leaves the bar, he finds Angela waiting for him, and they head out together to track down Pharmacy. As Paul digs deeper into his search, he finds out that Beth is stuck in the middle of a dangerous drug network controlled by a ruthless crime gang. This leads him face to face with an old enemy, Omar, a powerful crime boss with a personal vendetta against Paul. The bad blood goes back to a tragic mission from Paul's past, where he accidentally killed Omar's family while trying to take out Omar himself. Now, Paul and Angela realize they're being followed by two of Omar's men. The thugs quickly report back to Omar, telling him where Paul and Angela are. In response, Omar orders them to capture Paul and bring him to him. Meanwhile, Omar's assistant, Mark, suggests letting Paul go, but Omar, consumed by rage and the desire for revenge, dismisses Mark's advice. This leads to a high-speed chase where Omar's men try to force Paul off the road, shooting at his car. After an intense pursuit, Paul manages to crash the thug's car. He confronts one of them, who admits that they were sent by Omar. Paul warns the man to tell Omar to stay out of his way before shooting him. Back at the motel, Angela is stunned by Paul's actions. Paul opens up about his past, revealing that he had joined the military before becoming a hitman. One of his missions was to eliminate Omar. In a flashback, we see Omar with his family on his daughter's first day of school. Omar's wife was supposed to drive their daughter, but tragically, their car exploded. Paul had been targeting Omar, not his family, but everything went horribly wrong. From that moment, Omar vowed revenge for his family's deaths. Realizing that Angela is now in danger, Paul takes her to a hotel and leaves her with his old friend Sam. Sam, who knows all about the dangers Paul faces, asks if Paul is going after Pharmacy, a notorious cartel boss. Despite the risks, Paul insists on facing Pharmacy head-on because Beth's life is at stake. Sam, understanding the gravity of the situation and knowing Paul's skills, agrees to help, as they've been close friends for years. After Paul leaves, Angela asks Sam if he'll send backup to help him, but Sam assures her that Paul doesn't need any. He explains that Paul, once known as the Prince in New Orleans, was a legendary hitman who controlled a large part of the city. Sam advises Angela to stay away from Paul for her own safety. Paul heads to a nearby gun shop, and when the owner sees a tattoo on his hand, he's immediately shocked. He recognizes the tattoo from family stories and realizes Paul isn't just any ordinary person. Paul calmly explains that he knew the owner's father and is just here to pick up some gear. After the explanation, the owner leads Paul to a hidden room full of weapons. Paul checks them out, but they're all inoperable, so the owner gives him a couple of his own guns to use. Grateful, Paul takes the guns and heads toward Pharmacy's location. When Paul arrives at Pharmacy's headquarters, he makes his way through a building filled with addicts until he finds Pharmacy. Jokingly, he tells him that he's taking Beth back and nothing can stop him. Pharmacy, however, insists that Beth is there by choice and refuses to let her go. He shows Paul to a room where Beth is sleeping. But before Paul can get close, Pharmacy's men ambush him. They've been tipped off by Omar and are there to capture both Paul and Beth. Paul fights back, disarming the thugs, and despite getting injured by a stab wound and a gunshot, he manages to rescue Beth. He gets her into his car and speeds off. Meanwhile, Omar is at a building, interrogating a man who's been severely beaten by his men. Omar asks the man where Paul is, but when the man can't answer, Omar shoots him in a fit of rage. At the motel, Paul, Beth, and Angela reunite with Sam. Paul tends to his wounds, but things take another dark turn when Omar discovers their location and realizes Sam has betrayed him. Furious, Omar sends his men to the motel to capture Paul. As the thugs arrive, Paul tells Angela to hide, and he and Sam prepare to defend themselves. Omar's men open fire, but Paul and Sam fight back, taking down the attackers one by one. As the conflict intensifies, Omar's determination to get revenge on Paul grows stronger. He plans to kidnap Beth, and Paul is ready to do whatever it takes to protect her. Amid the chaos, Omar seizes the opportunity to grab Beth. Hearing the gunshots, Paul rushes to find her, but is blocked by a hail of bullets from Omar's men. Together with Sam, they fight their way through the attackers. But when Paul finally catches up with Omar, he finds Beth in his grip with a gun pointed at her. Beth tries to break free, and in the brief moment of distraction, Paul shoots Omar, ending the threat. In the final scene, Paul successfully rescues Beth and leads her out of the building where Angela is waiting.